Welcome to today's webinar. This is Mike Steckline, Network Director at the Theta Care Center for Healthcare Value. We have a special treat today. The Strategy Deployment Affinity Group at the Healthcare Value Network has been in function for the last couple of years, and we've had discussions about having various speakers present. And we received an offer from Pascal Dennis to provide some information about his observations and recommendations about strategy deployment. Turn the presentation over to Pascal.
I'm a professional engineer by training. I grew up professionally at Toyota Motor Manufacturing Canada, TMMC, and I've had stints at Kentucky and New United Motor Company in Fremont, California, and Japan. I was lucky enough to learn strategy deployment, or Hoshin Kanri, from a master trainer, Shin Furukawa, and I stand on his shoulders and am very grateful for all he's taught me. So I like to hopefully do a little bit of what he did for me for you all. Topic is strategy deployment, which is widely misunderstood. I wrote a book on it some years ago, which has been graciously and kindly reviewed and used. But I emphasize to people that in that book I tried to write a movie, if you will, make a movie or a video of the reality of strategy deployment in a real organization, but I could only get about 10% of the movie into a book, even a book of 300 pages. There is a follow-up book coming, but getting the right things done and making it stick, the underlying architecture and infrastructure, if you will. But that book is a little bit off in terms of time. So let's begin at the beginning. S2 here. Very good. What is this business system called Lean? I start here because strategy deployment rests on a foundation of Lean fundamentals, and you cannot set it unless you have a profound understanding of value and waste and standardized work, visual management, flow, pull, and all the other methodologies of Lean. Here's a very brief definition of Lean: a business system involving all employees, the idea of continuous improvement, elimination of waste, and variation. Let me emphasize that not merely a set of tools or methods. Lean is more similar to a profession like law or medicine or engineering. I was trained as a chemical engineer, and the fundamentals in my profession are fluid mechanics and mass transfer and heat transfer, the principles of chemistry and physics. And it's understood that you take these principles and you can apply them in ever more complex applications. That's the nature of a profession. If it's just a set of tools that aren't connected to one another or aren't ever more applied ever more interestingly and in more complex situations, then it's not really a profession. So Lean is the same thing. It's not simply a scavenger hunt for waste, for example, but all the tools and methods must connect to one another, and most importantly, must connect to strategy deployment. Now, a very brief image here of SD. We've all seen this house of strategy deployment, and I won't go into it in great detail, but I will highlight what I call the 4 revolutions, which are fundamental to not just Lean, but also strategy deployment. The first fundamental revolution is of continuous improvement, which is now I was taught as an engineer or in business school. In fact, in engineering school, I was taught that certain things are given. For example, a changeover on a given type of machine, stamping machine or what have you, is fixed. It's 2-hour changeover. The idea that the workplace, the Gemba, if you will, is a control point was not understood in engineering school. I don't think it's understood today either in our professional schools, certainly not in engineering and business. Nothing is given. If changeover in a machine or in an operating room or any kind of a process is quote unquote 2 hours, there's no reason that smart people, rapid experiments, cannot reduce that to 2 minutes. It's hard as it may be to believe at first glance. The second revolution underlying lean and strategy deployment is this concept of customer in. Large organizations, large hospitals, large manufacturing firms, and what have you, understandably are enamored of what they're doing because it's usually pretty cool. Their thinking is product out or service out, with a number of dysfunctions gained thereby. Lean and strategy deployment is based on the opposite. It's customer in. And that also speaks to the second rule of lean, which is fundamental to the check process in strategy deployment. Rule 2 being direct binary connections, upstream and downstream. So the idea of an internal customer and supplier having a direct binary connection. What do you need from me? Okay. Here's how we're going to measure it, and I want you to come at least once a week and tell us how we're doing. That reflects the second revolution of customer in. The third revolution underlying strategy deployment is total involvement. Again, it's easy to say, and we all say that we like it, but we're taught that way. In engineering and in business school, for example, I was taught that, and see if this rings a bell in your training, I was taught that improvement happens when very smart people, just like me and everybody else in our MBA class or engineering class, come up with really clever strategies, and you all, or shop floor, or wherever that is, do them. In other words, improvement comes a small group of people at the top figuring out clever solutions, and then everybody else doing them. And I think that's especially prevalent in healthcare professions as well. At least that's what my colleagues tell me. So revolution number 3 is total involvement. And the fourth revolution, the Japanese call societal yokoten, or societal learning, lateral learning. We borrow each other's learning curves, and industry by industry, we piggyback on one another's knowledge, and thereby society as a whole prospers and rises up in terms of performance and humanity and outcomes. So let me summarize the 4 revolutions underlying the lean business system and strategy deployment. As I summarize these, I'm going to pose a question to you. Well, has my organization internalized these revolutions? Because the answer to that question very well may determine how effectively we implement the lean business system and strategy deployment. So again, the 4 revolutions are, first one, continuous improvement. Second one, customer in philosophy. The third one, total involvement. Fourth one, societal yokoten, or lateral learning across the society. Okay. Now, a brief historical summary, just to give people a sense of the depth of the roots of the business system we're talking about here. It's easy to say, well, it's, continuous improvement. It's 20 years old. It arose with TQM wave or something like that. But in fact, it goes back, at least 130 years. I'm not going to talk about each of these photographs in detail, but I will highlight the picture on the left. Frederick Taylor is the father of industrial engineering, and his brilliant 1908 book, Scientific Management, first intuited the idea of standardized work and a very basic PDCA for physical work. The second photograph, Henry Ford, of course, and Henry applied Taylor's ideas in automotive manufacturing, and very famously, between 1908 and 1922, was able to A, produce 2 million cars a year, and B, double the wages of his workers. Quite an astonishing achievement, if you think of it. Alfred P. Sloan is the next photograph, and he made very important innovations in managing multinational corporations and had many useful marketing insights that had eluded Henry Ford. The next photograph is the great Edward Deming, who honestly was one of several wise men, quote unquote, who helped the Japanese develop the profound system of knowledge and complete history's greatest U-turn. In 50 years, they went from rubble, literally, to one of the top few economies in the world. The next three photographs are wonderful Japanese senseis, Sakichi Toyota, Taiichi Ono, and Shigeo Shingo, who built on Deming's work and Duran's work to create, again, the profound system of knowledge, as Deming called it. And the last photo on the right is one of my heroes, the great Peter Drucker. Contributions were also seminal. Let me say that I believe that what happened between 1946 and 52 in Japan is a red letter period in 20th century history that will be remembered to be as important, or if not more important, than the Cold War, because you had the best and the brightest in two great civilizations that met in a spirit of peace and friendship and learned from one another. And what arose out of it, the Toyota business system was the most obvious expression of it, is utterly unique, and we're still learning how to apply it, how to use it, how to build on it. So the revolution is not complete by any means, and you all in healthcare are pioneers, if you will, that are translating and disseminating these profound ideas in a very new field. Okay, let's begin to basics here. So I should describe myself a little bit. As I say, I'm a professional engineer and author, and learned this stuff at Toyota. But the last 16 years, I've been running an international coaching firm called Lean Pathways, and we've 50, 60 plus major implementations in that time, beginning in automotive and moving to automotive parts and aerospace, into construction and home building, into farming, and the last 7 or 8 years into healthcare. And we've seen the following pattern: implementations. The tools are usually the first thing we latch onto because they're simple and elegant and make intuitive sense, whether it's 5S or quick changeover or total productive maintenance. We start with the tools. Maybe we'll read a book or go to a seminar or something. The improvement is short-lived, maybe 6 months and out, largely because of the Hawthorne effect. We call this the Wheel of Fortune approach. So many firms, reflecting on their experience, said, you know what, the tools really fit together. The tools should make us system. By definition, a system is an integrated set of parts with a clearly defined goal. So we see things like the Ford production system, the Alcoa system, Virginia Mason production system, and that's good. That's very sound thinking, and usually the results are better and somewhat more sustainable. But we find that only when we underlie the tools and the system with a way of thinking do we have any sustainable results and any chance at doing really extraordinary things. So certain way of thinking underlies the tools and the system approach that I talked about. I'm going to highlight some of the key mental models as they arise. There are probably about 12 or 14 fundamental mental models without which a strategy deployment will not get very much traction. So let's dig into strategy deployment per se. You can see the pictogram here, Hoshin Kanri. Japanese is a language of pictures, and that pictogram means a number of things, including compass or shiny metal, or my favorite, ship in a storm heading in the right direction. We've translated it to strategy deployment, and as I said, as suggested, one of the earliest companies adopting it was Toyota, along with Bridgestone Tire. I should emphasize, though, that this is not a Japanese system per se. In fact, it's based on two American senseis, Peter Drucker and Joe Duran, who I mentioned, and they did the foundational work that led to a very prototypic strategy deployment system. I'm going to zoom out here and describe some core strategic concepts. I'm going to emphasize also that the business literature is not that good. It's quite confusing, actually. And the military literature on strategy and strategy deployment tends to be quite a bit better. So if you're interested in references, I would suggest things like Thucydides, the Peloponnesian War, Machiavelli, The Art of War, Karl von Clausewitz, On War, and Sun Tzu, of course, The Art of War. They tend to be much clearer in their thinking and their examples than the business literature, unfortunately. So building on that foundation, again, I hope you'll forgive me using military metaphors in the context of healthcare, but as I say, it's more helpful for your understanding. In any event, some core definitions is our purpose. It's an expression of why we're fighting, if you will. What are we about? What are we trying to achieve? Strategy, in the military metaphor, answers the following questions. Where, when, and what forces will we fight? In addition, within our strategy, we seek specific objectives for each battle. And thirdly, tactics speak to how we'll fight a particular battle. A metaphor might be the D-Day invasion. What was the policy? Well, every woman in the Allied Armed Forces knew, in 2 words, unconditional surrender. So why are we fighting? Unconditional surrender. And variety of purpose has wonderful benefits. It allows the troops, the team, our team members to relax, focus on the job at hand. They don't have to constantly look up and say, well, what are we trying to do? And there are many examples in military history where a poorly defined purpose has essentially doomed any activity right from the start. The old adage, you cannot win if you don't define what victory means, is very apt. The most obvious example of that closer to home would be the Vietnam War, wherein the American Army won every major battle, including the Tet Offensive, and yet lost the war because the purpose was not clearly defined for a number of reasons beside the point. Lyndon Johnson was focused on other issues like the Great Society, etc., and didn't much know or care very much about Vietnam. This is all another terrific military book. It's called On Vietnam, On Strategy, the Vietnam War in Context by the late great Colonel Harry Summers. So let's keep these core definitions in mind as we dig into some of the fundamentals. Important point in the context of deploying a strategy relates to an earlier discussion. Been taught and suggested in terms of the left hand triangle that most of our effort needs to go on into selecting the ideal plan. It's all about selection, and it's a bunch of smart people just like us coming up with a fiendishly clever plan that everybody else will implement. So there's a little, a box at the end of our a flow chart that says implement, which I call and now miracles will happen. Of course, as the quote says, any damn fool can make a plan. It's the execution that gets you screwed up. In fact, we have to shift our thinking to the right-hand side. This section is maybe 20% of the effort, maybe less. Most of the work is in the deployment. In other words, in the translation, level by level by level, of the overall objective, so that everybody we'll see has a bite-sized chunk of activity. And therein lies the tail. One of the first activities we do, in coaching, say healthcare executives, is to strengthen the selection process, because usually there's very little triage, and it's not uncommon, and perhaps you all can reflect on your experience. Not at all uncommon to see, major healthcare organization with a few hundred quote-unquote improvement projects, which are the result of a quote-unquote focusing process. Well, obviously, you give us 200 things to focus on, we'll not be able to focus on anything. So we need to move to the right-hand side. Select, use intelligent thinking there, define the policy, define the critical few goals, and then stand back and support the deployment so that everybody is involved. Again, in order to do the stuff on the right, we have to have internalized the four revolutions, the idea of total involvement, for example, the idea of customer in, and the idea of continuous improvement through total involvement, customer in. Of strategy deployment is this very humble acronym, which everybody feels that they know, but in fact, probably takes several decades to really absorb. This is one of the great Dr. Deming's contributions. It's a description of the scientific method in practical management terms. There are different expressions of it, certainly in the literature, and much of Western philosophy seeks to explain and define the scientific method, the rational mind, etc. And PDCA is an excellent and practical way of summarizing it. Now, the heart of the PDCA is what we call grasping the situation. And that entails what we call wide deep scanning. Now, how do we do that? Well, and part of that is the Japanese concept of go-see, genshi, genbutsu, and in particular, senior leaders must go see, and thereby develop a sympathetic understanding of their zone. Now, the zone, in a major corporation might be 5 hospitals, or if it's one hospital, it's a smaller zone. Or if I'm a departmental leader, and I've got 10 units, that's my zone. I need to have routines built within my work and within my calendar that allow me to grasp the situation by mile wide and inch deep. That means some form of leader standard work, support of some form of level 1, level 2, level 3 checking, level 1 being the frontline team huddle, level 3 and above being senior leader check on strategic focus areas, but also entails inside and deep checking, some frequency to keep people honest, so to speak. And that, in turn, requires a deep understanding of your zone. Contrary to what we often learn in business school, to really get good at managing, you've got to understand the content. You can't just manage from a distance by the numbers, quote unquote, and expect to make meaningful progress. So that inch-wide, mile-deep phrase reflects a profound understanding of the zone gained by going to sea, by humble reflection, by developing deep connections with the people and with the customers that you serve. The strategy deployment process is, again, simple, quote unquote. It's the following permutation of the plan, do, check, adjust cycle. I should emphasize that there are multiple PDCA cycles within strategy deployment. It's a fractal, if you will, a continuously repeating pattern at smaller and smaller levels of magnification. I'll describe what the pattern looks like, but the translation just requires a lot of repetition, a lot of data points, a lot of experimentation. Humble nature. Otherwise, have a very superficial understanding, and our recipes and our countermeasures are likely to be extremely thin indeed. In any event, here's the algorithm. We begin developing the plan. So defining policy. I call it true north in the book, Getting the Right Things Done. So where are we going? What's our policy? What are we trying to achieve? Secondly, we have to answer the question, how do we get there? What are the critical few activities? Not the critical few hundred, but the critical few. Thirdly, what's preventing us? What breakthroughs are needed thereby? Secondly, we need to deploy the plan through this process that we call catchball. We seek to blow the elephant up, if you will, or break it up into its constituent parts and translate it level by level so that each zone has a piece of it. This concept of a key thinker or a deployment leader, a pacemaker, a chief engineer, if you will, is extremely helpful there, as we'll see. Thirdly, we have to monitor the plan. Entails level 1, level 2, level 3 checking, supported by connected standard work for leaders at all levels. And lastly, improve the system. Learned what worked, what didn't work, what is our mechanism for sharing that knowledge. Again, the fourth revolution of management is lateral learning, or Yokoten. So this concept of a book of knowledge or a database. Okay, so I'm going to dig into each of these in a little bit of detail. First, let me highlight core mental models that are enablers, and in the absence of which, as I said, it's very difficult to make any progress at all. The first one has to do with the role of the leader. And sadly, our professional schools have taught us, certainly I was taught, the image on the left-hand side. Bosses tell people what to do. And this is so prevalent that we don't even see it. It's like the proverbial water to the fish. They swim in the water. They can't imagine it not existing, So, as I said earlier, a small number of people develop fiendish strategies, usually very complex, not robust, based on a lot of wishful thinking, and everybody else implements them. In fact, strategy deployment in lean will not sustain itself. Certainly our results will not be transformative unless we start to think like senseis. And, again, that's misunderstood. People think, well, sensei simply means someone who's really nice and talks nice to people, and it's kind of like a summer camp, and everybody's really nice to one another. Well, that's not what a sensei is. A sensei is simply one who has gone before and who teaches thereby, who teaches by asking questions, and very tough questions. For example, what assumptions are countermeasures built? How will you test your countermeasures? What could go wrong? What if this happens? What if that doesn't happen? Etc. These kinds of Socratic questions. Quite an intense culture. So it's not summer camp. It's extremely demanding. The way I would the role of leader is as follows. This is Mr. Watanabe, Andy Watanabe, who is our president at Toyota Cambridge. And perhaps I can give you a little bit of homework. What are the implications of this phrase? I asked Andy, why do you always tell us about PDCA? Why is PDCA so important? And this is how he responded. A little bit of homework. What are the implications of this phrase? If our leaders were to practice in this way, how would their practice change? The second mental model without which we cannot hope to succeed has to do with standards. Speaking, and certainly in many, if not most industries, on the left-hand side, we have some standards somewhere. They're usually written standards, standard operating procedures or equivalent. Not too many pictures. They're certainly not written for the user in mind, quite confusing often. Often they're full of legalese and written for lawyers and by lawyers. Versus the image on the right-hand side. Simple visual standards for all important things. So simple means one page. Visual means pictures, and important things is self-explanatory. Sometimes we take standardization to absurd degrees and standardize things that are not important. For example, where a person should put their scissors or their mouse or their stapler on their desk. That's not important. The correct response to that would be, who cares where my stapler is? Okay, so simple visual standards for all important things. We saw a poignant and tragic example of contemporary thinking in the recent Ebola situation. Actually, before I talk about that, let me show you a simple example of this from my wife's kindergarten class. My wife, Pamela, teaches kids with special needs, kindergarten kids mainly. They have tremendous anxiety and fear about basic activities like going to the bathroom or washing their hands or tying their shoelaces. You can imagine the fear and risk of humiliation, etc. So now Pamela has developed simple visual standards for all important things in the way created here. So this is a set of pictures. The child moves the Velcro dot from left to right. Moreover, it expresses the Toyota algorithm for standard work: content, sequence, time, expected outcome. The content of the work and the sequence is quite clear. The expected outcome is clean hands, and there's an inspection, of course. And time is measured by 2 rounds of row your boat. So within this simple example, my dear wife has expressed all the fundamentals of Toyota standardized work. The impact, of course, is remarkable. The kids in her class learn at much quicker rates than the specialists expected. They're reading quicker, they're much more verbal and much more engaged usually than kids that have Asperger's or severe autism or other kinds of learning disabilities. And therein is an important lesson. Standards set you free. The pushback that we get in our coaching work, from with the best of intentions from senior executives or for a chief medical officer or a chief nursing officer, etc. Is, well, this is an art. Surgery is an art. Standards, will be a straitjacket. It'll hold us back. And we get the same argument from lawyers, and we've worked with patent law firms. In fact, if you dig into it and reflect on this example, standards such as free and creativity, Kaizen, continuous improvement is entirely dependent on having a solid foundation of standards which free us up to do Kaizen. And as I suggested, current thinking in some health organizations was highlighted during the recent Ebola crisis at Texas Presbyterian. Remember the initial panic, and then CDC did their standards, isolation, et cetera, and so I downloaded the standards, and here's an example. This is really one of the better pages. Most of the pages had no tables at all, no colors, just solid blocks of text in 10-point font, and it was utterly incomprehensible, of course, to the people who needed it. And I say that with great respect. It's not ill will or anything on CDC's part or, ineptness. No, they're actually very smart people, but their mental model, as I said, is that standards have to be something other than simple visual and other qualities that I just described. Later iterations were a little bit better, so we began to see some photographs a little bit more usable, but still a lot of shortcomings. In particular, missing in all of these examples that CDC released was the most important aspect of all in standards, which is the embedded test, which tells us okay, not okay. Embedded tests are central to the concept of standardization so that you can make problems visible. We could dig into that at another time, perhaps. To the 4 steps in strategy deployment, see if I can highlight some key points. Under develop the plan, the key outputs of the develop the plan phase is a one-page storyboard that we call an A3. I'm going to say this 3 times. It's not about the form. It's not about the form. It's not about the form. In fact, the only stipulation I'd have with respect to the form is the left-hand side is pain, and the right-hand side is hope. So step 1, develop the plan. We talk about the A3 storyboard, that 11 by 17-inch piece of paper, as being the deliverable phase. I'll emphasize the following. It's not about the form. The only really stipulate is the left-hand side should be pain. The right-hand side should describe what I call hope. So the left-hand side, here's where the shoe pinches. The right-hand side, here's what we intend to do about it. The key point is that it's a narrative. People are hardwired for narrative. Certainly the latest brain imaging research underlies that. If it's an interesting story, people will lean forward when you're telling it. If it's not, they're going to lean back and you'll lose them very quickly. The next slide here. The next slide shows a storyboard for a strategy A3. In fact, there are 4 different kinds of A3s that are germane to strategy deployment. But strategy A3 is perhaps the most important, and you can see the flow of the story. The top left corner defines critical business needs, the gap that we must close. The next box on the left is our reflection on what we did last year, and the Japanese term hansei means a sincere and honest reflection on weaknesses and failures. And that humility allows us to grasp the situation in the way described earlier and form a hypothesis. Important at the bottom left hypothesis. We believe that if we do A, B, and C, we will achieve results in D and E. That binary nature is important because it tells us at the end of the year, as we do our review, whether or not we've learned anything. And if you stick with it after 5 or 10 years, you have profound knowledge of the black box known as your business. And the right-hand side, as I said, is hope. So the big box on the right is our plan to implement the hypothesis. And the bottom right is what might go wrong. Rule of thumb, everything goes wrong. No plan goes according to plan. Murphy rules the universe. In fact, the purpose of the plan is to tell us when we are off the plan. Common failure modes in the plan phase. Most common of all is not defining the purpose. The top left corner is fuzzy. And this is akin to not defining our policy in the earlier metaphor. You can't win if you don't define what victory looks like. The second deadly failure, also at epidemic levels, is simply jumping from the gap to the right-hand side to the countermeasures. And ironically, the more experienced and senior a team is, the more likely they are to do that. The effects are ruinous. One obvious effect is, the syndrome of 200 improvement activities. This is our focus list, which of course is no focus at all. So those are two of many rabbit holes we can fall into in the develop the plan phase. Let me move back. The second step is deploy the plan. Again, we cannot tell people what to do. The Soviet model, or the model taught, sadly, in so many of our professional schools, and we have to translate our plans by asking questions, by engaging people. So here's the gap. So under patient safety, we had X number of infections. Here's the gap, and our analysis indicates that we have a number of Paretos, these departments, this time of day, that equipment, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what do you think? You own this corner of that elephant known as infections. What do you think root causes might be? What experiments might you run to confirm? And so on. So thereby, you translate this elephant, in this case I've called infections, into bite-sized chunks that each group can take on, and collectively they add up to an elephant. Also the beauty of deploying in this way is that you engage people. If you ask a question, the door opens. If you tell them, that door closes. And when people are as capable and as motivated as they are, in healthcare, that's a terrible tragedy. One of the enablers, of course, is this idea of a key thinker or a maker or deployment leader. That's akin to the enzyme and a chemical reaction. Deployment tends to be very, very slow, just like some reactions are slow, until we add the enzyme, and then whoosh, they go to completion. Pardon my chemical engineering metaphors there. The result of deployment, of course, is a tree diagram. We call it the planning and execution tree, and this one here, hunger in Wisconsin, might give some sense of what it looks like. So let's say our overall policy is to reduce hunger in Wisconsin from X to Y. Deployment entails translating that overall policy into bite-sized chunks. So you can see at the second level, the tree might, in our zone, say, okay, our job is to reduce hunger in Milwaukee, for the City Council of Milwaukee. And further down within our team, we seek to reduce hunger among local school children in Milwaukee. And then right frontline unit, why our job is to make sure the kids in the local schools have hot lunches. So thereby, the elephant is translated into bite-sized chunks. And that's the essence of deployment. And of course, to do that, you have to ask questions, and in the manner that I described. Third element of strategy deployment, I've inferred, has to do with checking. That may be the most common failure mode, and it's where the wheels really begin to fall off, because here we're starting to talk about a management system, and good checking entails level 1, level 2, level 3 stand-up meetings usually, wherein there is a clear definition of target, actual. There's management of exceptions. The drill is something like this: what are the hot spots? What are you doing about them? The underlying thinking is that problems are gold. Treasure them. Problems are simply a deviation from the standard. They don't mean, having a problem does not mean that I'm a poor manager. It's another core mental model. In fact, problems are normal. And being a good manager means knowing where they are and having countermeasures in place. So this is a fundamental difference. Being a good manager does not mean never having problems. It's knowing where they are, having proven activity and clear countermeasures in place, and knowing the status of them. Okay. It's an image of that connected checking. Very hard to do and briefly largely lacking in many industries, including healthcare. So level 1 checking would be the frontline checking on the right-hand side of this slide. So that entails standard work for our team huddles and target and actual for critical activities. And another subtlety is that there are two streams of work which need to be visible thereby. One is improvement work, in other words, the work of strategy deployment, and the second is routine work. If I can mix my metaphors, we have to improve the donuts, but we also have to make the donuts. So we've got to make the donuts, get our routine work done, and we've got to improve the donut making process and the donuts themselves. So the two streams. But the frontline huddle must reflect that. The level 3, the executive level, sometimes we see that. We see war rooms, for example, and stuff on the walls. That's good. But the connectivity, and I usually do not see a level 2 checking, say director level, wherein we are attacking the flow problems, the broader care line or value stream problems that are the prerequisites of any kind of meaningful breakthrough. Often we have frontline huddles, which are full of good people, motivated people, but are they connected through level 2 to level 3? So step 4, so it's to recap, develop the plan, deploy the plan, monitor the plan, and lastly, improve the system. Steps 1 to 3, we are making problems visible because problems are gold. Step 4, we need a shared problem-solving drill, and I've described one here. It's the one that we teach in our coaching. Do I have a problem? Do I know the cause? Have I proven cause and effect? Have I confirmed the countermeasure? Each of these questions is the tip of a proverbial iceberg, of course. And secondly, improve the system also speaks to our method of standardization. Once we've gotten to a root cause and fix it, how will we lock it in so that 30, 60, 90 days or longer, it doesn't come back? Okay. So the problems are distributed in a very interesting pattern. Here's what they look like. You've got many, many problems at the front line, of course, and very few big, ugly problems. So what we seek to do with strategy deployment is create this image here. A critical few, some kaizens as we call them, a handful, less than 5, entail some flow kaizens, that's usually at the care line or value stream level, and then many frontline kaizens, okay? We call those point kaizens. So affecting this connectivity and this image is really the purpose of leader standard work. So as we do rounds, we need to ask questions like, how connected is the activity at level 1, level 2, level 3? Secondly, how good is problem-solving technique? Have they clearly defined the target and the actual? Are they running good experiments? Thirdly, how motivated, how engaged are people? Have total involvement? What's the quality of the leadership? Are they able to get full value from all the terrific people we have? Okay. Summary: strategy deployment entails 4 steps: develop the plan, deploy the plan, monitor the plan, improve the system. It is part of the profound system of knowledge that Dr. Deming taught us. And it's hard. It's hard to sustain. One of the failure modes that I see now is we're not understanding the depth of the system, the connectivity of the tools and methodologies. We have that's the pioneering work that you all are doing. So lastly, I'll just show you an image here that reflects the role of the leader. We call it the watering model, and everything the leader does is replicated 10 times, just as a pebble in a stream emanates out for a very long time in these rings. So what you do is what you get. And that's a lot of my personal practice is coaching senior executives, helping them understand that. Lastly, if I can, if you're at all interested, why there are books that some of this stuff is in, Getting the Right Things Done, Lean Simplified, Andy and the Remedy. And I should say that I'm just about to sign a contract to write third installment of the Andy and Me trilogy, and it's called Andy and Me and the Hospital. So if you know the characters in the book, they go into a major hospital. With that, I will encourage you to join our blog. Go to the website. You can download all sorts of stuff for free. This is part of Societal Yokotan, as I said. The very big LinkedIn group and a couple of bugs a week and very good comments, and it's all free. And if you're so inclined, why feel free to partake. And I've gone quickly here. If you can't get an answer to your question, feel free to give me an email. So with that, I will give the baton to Mike, and perhaps we can have some questions.